everybody. Welcome. I'm Chris Yonker, and I'm really excited about having Brandon Campbell with me, a friend, someone who's mentored me a bit in my health and wellness quest, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And also a fellow graduate of the Wood Smalls NLP training program. So he is a fellow practitioner in NLP. So let me talk a little bit about. Can I just do it like a pseudo introduction of you, Brandon, and then you can add if you want to add anything. Is that cool?
Sounds great.
So so Brandon and I were in the same NLP class, and I was watching him. I was watching what he was eating because he was like in pretty good shape, and I'm like, oh, what's this guy up to? And he was kind of intense, quite frankly. That I remember about you at the time, but regardless, he had some outcomes that I really liked, and I thought, if and when I ever need to up level my financial, not financial, my how about that potentially too, but my health and wellness well-being, this is the guy I'm going to reach out to. So, so a couple of years ago, I was in a situation where I was coming up on turning 50, and I was like, whoa. I want to be in the best shape of my life. And also, I was kind of annoyed by the fact that I just had carried down a few extra pounds, which wasn't a lot, but it was enough for me to be bothered by it. And I really wanted to be optimal energy, focus, and body fat percentage for my body, partly out of ego, just honestly, but not that I was going to model or anything, but I just really wanted to own it. And so I reached out to him, and he's like, he asked me this question. He said, what are you willing not to do? And I said, well, am I willing not to do? And I said, well, I'm willing to do pretty much anything unless it's going to conflict with my personal life, my life, my family, my values. And I'm willing to do anything unless you're going to tell me that I can't drink wine anymore. Because if that's going to be the answer, I don't know if I can go down the road. And because we're wine aficionados. And he goes, okay, is there anything else? I said, no, that's pretty much it. And he's like, okay, totally can get you there. So I entrusted him, and he's produced that outcome for me. And I built some strategy changes, mindset changes, and just basically I learned some things that I thought were true about health and wellness. And I'll tell you guys, like, there's few people you'll probably meet that have read the books that I've read, studied what I've studied. So I didn't say I knew it all, because I knew I didn't. But there was still, my point is, like, we can still think we know things, and there's still if we're not getting the outcomes we want, then we got to ask ourselves, is there something else that really I think I know that maybe isn't true? And that's what Brandon helped me do. And I really enjoyed the results and the process so much that I know I continually work with Brandon ongoingly just to help produce more outcomes in my life. So that's my, and he's got 4 kids with another one on the way. That'll be 5 total. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think I got that right. And
that's right.
He lives in Arizona, and to a beautiful lady. And that's my introduction on you. Do I miss anything? That's, like, I'm sure there's a lot of other background stuff, but I think proof is better than just someone's bio.
No, it sounds great. Yeah. So first thing, I, as you know, don't take responsibility for any of my clients' results, right? I didn't produce any outcomes for you. You produced the outcomes. I just supported you in doing so, right? So that's one point of refinement that I would make, because at the end of the day, like what Chris had kind of alluded to there, there's a lot of information out there, right? Information is certainly not the thing that we have a shortage of. It's just a matter of implementation of that information and whether or not you're willing to gather objective feedback around what's serving you and what's not. And so that's kind of the thing that Chris and I have done a lot of, and that the thing that we'll dive into today, I'm sure, around some of the things that we'll talk about, is kind of the approach at large, right? We have this mistaken idea, because of the way that most people market themselves and the things that we're sold, that there's one right way to create health or to create business success or to create productivity or create any of the things that we want. And that couldn't be further from the truth, right? And in NLP, we call it a generalization, right? Where you take something that may work in certain contexts and then generalize it across the population or across the humanity, whatever you want to generalize it across. But there's a big fallacy in that. So in terms of approach, like what we'll start out with today is just the paradigm, right? What works for me, what works for Chris, may be totally different than what would work for the other people who are here with us today and those tuning in. And that's fine, right? And we don't have to all do things exactly the same way in an attempt to get exactly the same outcomes, because at the end of the day, none of us have exactly the same outcomes anyway. So why on earth would we all try to do it the exact same way? And so that's kind of, the other thing that I just like to throw in is we can come at this from a different paradigm. And when we do that, we can not only get to the outcomes that we would like to much easier, but we can keep them, right? The things that Chris has accomplished aren't just temporary short-term goals that he wanted to, achieve for a finite point in time. They're things he wanted to integrate into his life so that he could maintain them. And that's what he's done effectively. So that's kind of the approach, is not just, okay, how can I do something, even if I really, really dislike it, for a certain period of time to achieve a result, and then hold on for dear life to keep the result. How can instead we create the result while simultaneously creating new habits, patterns, beliefs, a new identity, such that that result is easy to keep, right? And more enjoyable, ideally, than whatever you were doing beforehand, to not create that outcome.
Yeah, that's really true. Really good. So let me, part of the reason that we set this up at this point in time is I was listening to Dr. Mark Hyman last night, in fact, and he did, Mark Hyman is functional medicine doctor, very well known and respected, best-selling author, and he knows his stuff, okay? And you can tell when someone's full of crap or if they're not, but regardless, he was talking about, if you look at the COVID situation right now, there's a lot of gifts and benefit to an awful, horrible situation. I've had a friend just pass away this week, so I'm not going to say that this isn't a horrific situation we're in. However, it does produce some feedback on where a lot of us are, and speak generally, in America and in other countries in regards to our own health and wellness. And if you look at how the severity of this disease, there's a lot we don't know, but we do know the severity of the disease, and even in many cases, the percentage of death rate is much higher for individuals with some level of underlying issues, and issues like heart disease, being diabetic, and things like that are drivers and producing worse outcomes for people. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, okay, what, of these things that, in fact, we look at it right now statistically, and Brandon, you'll know better than I, but is it not like 85% of the top 3 reasons people die is because of things that are lifestyle driven, correct?
Correct. Yeah,
so
at least.
Yeah, so now these are things that we know, and lifestyle meaning that we have something we have control over, which is really cool. It wasn't like we were just born with this body and this biology, and all of a sudden now, okay, well, I'm screwed. That's not the case. In fact, there's been a lot of science behind that. But I just thought it'd be one of the good places to start is just when you're making change, leverage is important, right? I had leverage because I was turning 50 and had a timeline, and I'm going to use this as an anchor to create some additional leverage. Some people, they need to have a heart attack to get leverage. Some people, need to lose something to get leverage. But in essence, right now, there's a lot of fear in this pandemic, and neither one of us are about fear, but we could at least leverage the situation to create a driver for us to say, you know what, I probably should, not only just for myself, but those people, I have a social responsibility to improve my immunity. I have a social responsibility to be healthier so that I don't become what I'm dealing with becomes a burden on any part of the system. Do you want to comment on that as a kind of a starting point?
That's a great place to start. So in terms of, like what you're getting at there, again, like the thing that's interesting here is fear in terms of the way that we process it. And one thing that we didn't touch on much, my other background is very heavily kind of entrenched in neuroscience, right? So fear is something that's very unique in the way that we experience it in our brain, because for most people, they think of like the reptilian brain, fight, flight, or freeze, right? Those sorts of responses. And you see when you look out at the greater landscape right now, a lot of people in that part of their brain. And while that's a sometimes viewed as a very negative thing because it removes logic and creativity from the table in terms of your prefrontal cortex and what goes on up there, fear is also something that incites action of some sort in most cases, right? The reason that we freeze is to assess the situation, right? To figure out, okay, what is a better option, to move forward and in some terms fight, right? Or to flee and run away from, right? So there are a lot of people right now who are experiencing this, and fear can be a catalyst for doing something differently in your life. And the beautiful thing about the situation that we're in, again, as horrific as it is, and the reality is still unfolding, so it's very difficult to discern exactly what's real and what's kind of maybe a little inflated, depending on the media sources that you're following. But either way, the reality that we're facing is that disruption is pretty much a certainty for all of us, right? The things that we were doing 2 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, 3 months ago are very unlikely to be the things that we're doing today, right? So part of that disruption is all of the habits and patterns that we were just kind of going through by default day after day are now suddenly not there. So it's a huge opportunity for those of us who want to do something proactively to better our lives, whether it be to improve our health, to improve our relationships, right? To really move forward and do something to improve our communities or step up as a leader. And that's what, like, I'm really viewing this as for most of my coaching clients, as Chris and I have already touched on and talked about in some of our conversations, is disruption provides opportunity when you look at it from a different perspective. So that's what I would love to kind of get into today, is some of the opportunity that lies in where we are now, about maybe taking a look at some of the paradigms that, you know, we had just looked at as the way that things were because they were that way. You know, I mean, the traditional work schedule of going into the office and working a 9 to 5 or working a traditional work day was the norm for a lot of Americans and a lot of people around the world. And that's not happening now for most people. So what can we do instead, and how can we leverage those things to actually benefit in this time and come out the other side, not just okay, right? Like there's a huge difference, and this is something that I really firmly believe in, between resilience, right? Which resilience is kind of coming out the other side of things okay, and the concept of anti-fragility, right? Anti-fragility is that, okay, stressors are going to be placed upon you, and as a result of those stressors, you can come out the other side of whatever the stressful event is better off, right? So right now, resilience is one model, right? And one thing that we can attempt to do, come out the other side okay and still able to continue to weather a storm. But the other way, and the thing that I think is most resourceful for most of us, is to think about how we can be more anti-fragile in all of this. The stress is here upon us, right? The situation is real. We're all displaced. We're all looking at things from a different perspective. So let's leverage that to our benefit so that we can have better habits, better patterns, better ways of working as we come out the other side of this.
So describe the difference between, well, what's, you know, discernment is something that we know is, in order to have, or not discernment, you said, what was the other word? Not, you said anti-fragile, what was the other word? I lost it.
Resilient. Resilience.
Yeah, right? So we know resilience is something that we want to develop to a degree, but the problem with the resilience is you can't get it unless you have something to overcome, right? Which I think is where you're going with this, but I want to dig a little bit deeper so we can get some context. Mm-hmm. So what needs to occur? What's the difference in those two tenets? And I mean, this is obviously this is a psychological frame to come from, but even in what we will cover in this hour, we also cover, you know, what are some strategies and patterns to do to take advantage, you know, that we, because everyone's looking for, I mean, I just talked to a client today who, I mean, I know that if he's not balanced, he's not going to drop, his nice performance is going to be off, right? And I could tell on the phone with him right away, I could tell he's off of his normal workout schedule. Just right away, I could tell, right? I could tell his sleep was off too. I could tell in his tonality, been working with him long enough. So my goal is when we're off balance, right? It's like not to lose balance, it's to minimize the amount of time that we're off, right? And so but this mindset piece is really important. So unpack this model of anti-fragile and talk a little bit about what's the differential off of the idea of being resilient.
Well, so the big differential in my mind is, resilience is kind of just accepting, right, the stress for what it is and trying to weather the storm, right? Like trying to make it through, right? Like, okay, we're all, a lot of people out there in the world right now are like on pause, right? They're on pause with their work, they're on pause with their business, they're on pause with they have children, with their schooling, right? Like everything is like on pause, right? And so right now it's like, okay, how can we make it to the other side of this, right? When we press play again, how can we make it through, right? And that is usually like what you were kind of alluding to there, Chris, something that's more about like survival, right? Like, well, how can we get through this type of scenario, which again is more wrapped up in a lot of the fear versus the concept of anti-fragility, where it's almost welcoming it. It's almost to the opposite end of the spectrum, where it's like, not only are challenges going to arise, they're one of the few things that are guaranteed in life, right? We're going to go through times of adversity. We're going to have things that are thrown at us that were totally unexpected. And when they are thrown at us, how can we allow them to become something that we come out the other side even better as a result of? And so that's the big thing, is like right now we're all experiencing a lot of this stress, right? Which is, again, it can be viewed as something that's negative or something that's positive. For most people, the vast majority of people that I talk to, it's experienced as something negative right now because they're just trying to get through it, right? They're just trying to get to the other side of it. And so my kind of invitation to those of you who are here and tuning in is to think about it instead as, okay, the stress is here. How can we grow from it? How can we allow it to serve us in some way so that we can create new habits, new patterns, new ways of being that will not only serve us right now, right, in the stressful situation that we're in, but also will serve us even better once we're on the other side of it, right? Once all of the rates of viral spread have flatlined, once we start to see that we're able to start to resume some of what we were doing before, how can we go back to that and be even more well-equipped to succeed, be even more well-equipped to perform at high levels because of the patterns that we create now?
That's great.
So do you want to dive in, Chris? Like what would you like to kind of do in terms of structure here today? Do you want to go into some strategies for how to make this possible?
So here's what I'd like to do. Yeah. So what I'd like to do is say let's say I'm a CEO or business owner, which is people that are with us right now, and probably most of the market that will want to watch this. And let's say that, okay, I'm in a relationship, and I know I need to take care of my health and wellness. So don't overwhelm me. I mean, there was that article I sent you on text. Part of the reason I sent it to you is a New York Times article. For those, obviously they didn't get it because I just sent it to Brandon, but it's basically about stop trying to do so much. And because we took these people, we've been another generalization to the American population especially, have overscheduled, over busy lives. And then now we're like, we're home. Oh my God, I got all this time. I'm going to paint this room. I'm going to clean the garage. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z and ABC, and I'm going to homeschool, and I'm going to build my business. And like, it's almost set up to fail from the beginning anyway. Oh, and we're in the middle of like this epidemic, and this could be one of the biggest historical things that we all go through in our lives. So there's already a little hum of tension in the environment, which can be contagious if we're not conscious enough. So all these things are going on, and I've got to take care of myself. So tell me, like, if you were me, and I know something's not the same for everybody, but I know this one's the same for everybody, and it might be a little different amounts, but there's certain things that are, like, I got to take care of my immune system, and I got to take care of myself, and I got to manage my stress. So can you give us some strategies that we can note that you would think would be helpful to pay attention to? And then how do I know what's too much, and how do I know what's not enough? I think was another question I think a lot of people might have in their minds.
Okay, absolutely. No, that's great. So in terms of kind of where things are with this, we want to view it from the lens of what can I influence, right? What things can I influence right now because of some of the changes that have taken place? And so most of us, right, that I've kind of talked to and know of, with the exception of some of the people who are still kind of on the front lines of what's being done in the effort to kind of protect us and continue to care for the people who are already affected by this, are working from home now, right? And that's pretty standard. So one of the things that is very different for a lot of people is, even if they had things that they were doing beforehand, usually most of those things were kind of conveniently separated, right? So if you were working out already, you were probably not working out at home, right? You were probably going to a gym or someplace else and going to get your workout in, or doing yoga practice, or whatever you may have been doing. And so now all of a sudden, everything that we are going to be doing is going to be done in the confines of our own home. And so what I kind of see with some of this is letting go of the siloed approach that we once had, that was very convenient and easy because of separate environments where we were able to do all these things. Right? You could go to the office and you could work. You could go to the gym and you could work out. You could, go on a date night with your wife and get away from the kids and be in a restaurant with her alone. You could, go and play with the kids at the playground and just be with the kids alone, right? All of these separate environments allowed us to kind of have this idea that we were like separate, like we had these separate areas of our lives that were all conveniently siloed. Now, the reality is, for most of us, we kind of recognize at some level that has never really been the case. There's always like this kind of, feel where there's like, I'm never really totally just in this one area, always thinking about something in the back of my mind. So now what I invite all of you to kind of test with this is, how can we let go of that siloed approach and start to integrate our approach, right? To health especially. So as you go through your day, and especially as you go through your work day, if you're still able and continuing to work and provide leadership to your teams and those sorts of things, then it's not something that has to be an accident, right? You don't have to, oh, I hope by the end of the day I can get a workout in, or I hope by the end of the day I can be well hydrated or eat the way that I wanted to eat. Instead, what I found is, for most of my clients, if they let go of, okay, if I'm going to work out, it has to be an hour-long workout and it has to fit at this time and in this window. And if I'm going to eat, I have to eat these 3 square meals, or these 5 to 6 small meals, or all of these things that, again, like from the old paradigm, was the way that things were and were easy to stick to. Instead, how can we integrate these things? So if you're going to move, how can you move first thing in the morning to get your body moving and get your brain moving? And it doesn't matter what the movement is so much, right? As long as it's something that ideally you enjoy, right? So if you are capable and are in a place where you can go for a walk, right? Even if it's to go for a walk around your backyard or around, someplace that's near you, then going for a walk and getting moving in the morning, right? And allowing that movement to be something that happens. And then also making sure that first thing in the morning, you're hydrating well, and starting to account for some of the things that we know always will influence our bodies and our immune systems in a positive way, right? So those are things that, again, don't have to take an hour or 30 minutes or, a huge chunk of time. In 5 minutes each, right? You can go for a brief walk, get your body moving. You can do some light stretching. You can even do a brief workout if you wanted to. And then in another minute or 2 minutes, you can hydrate and drink a liter of water first thing in the morning, right? And then once we get started and going with our day, we've started our day with a foundation of something that you're proactively deciding to do, something that's beneficial and healthy for yourself. And it's not an accident, it's premeditated, it's something that you've agreed to do with yourself. And then after that, break up the day as much as you need to right now. I know a lot of people out there that are attempting to work from home in an environment that's totally different, with a lot of different distractions available to them, that are trying to work their traditional schedule. And that's incredibly difficult, because your traditional schedule was something that worked for you when you were in an office, in an environment that was designed for work, without all the other distractions, without all the other things that are going on in your home. And so that's the thing that's really nice here, is if an integrated approach means that, once an hour you get up and go for another walk, or once an hour you go and connect with your wife, or connect with your children, or connect with your spouse. Those sorts of things are really beautiful, because you can integrate that. And again, it doesn't have to be, all right, I work for an hour and I'm with my kids for an hour and I work for an hour. The structure of this is designed to create more freedom for you, not to confine you. And so with these things, it's, again, a very different approach But it's one that you know that you can stick to because it doesn't have to be exactly the same every day. And sometimes if you're focused and you're feeling really good and work is going incredibly well, then you can ride that. And then when you start finding yourself get onto Facebook or browse the news sites and like try to figure out like what's going on today and all the statistics and those sorts of things, and you know that you're not being productive toward the outcomes that you want and the things that you want to create, then take a break, right? That's a rabbit hole that's very easy to get sucked into right now because the collective consciousness is so hyper focused on it. And for most of us, it doesn't really serve us in our own individual outcomes. As long as we're doing the things that we're doing to care for ourselves and protect ourselves and our families and those other people out there that could be impacted if we are going out and doing things against the kind of best wishes of our governments and those sorts of things, then that's kind of all we can do, right? It doesn't necessarily serve you to spend 3 hours a day figuring out what the numbers are in every country around the world and every state across the union, right? So if you find yourself getting into some of those rabbit holes, breaking things, right? Allowing yourself to go break things up, ideally with movement or a good nutritious meal or some connection with your spouse or some connection with your children if you have them. Those are things that can integrate your day very easily and can start to create very positive momentum for you. Because when we do that and we provide like the mental space and the physical movement of any sort, even if it's just getting up away from your home office and going into a different section of your house, you're still moving, right? You're still getting out of that. You're breaking from that environment, which leads to you having better focus when you come back. So that's the thing that I really recommend here is you being more intentional with the breaks that you have and integrating things that you want to get done or that you haven't been able to get done in the past because you've been confined to a schedule that was very fixed, right? That schedule isn't fixed any longer, right? For nearly everyone who's working from home, they don't all have like the same parameters that they once had and the same level of accountability to stay stuck to that same schedule. And Chris, you can chime in on this a little bit because your structure in terms of work has been different for quite some time because you proactively chosen to do so.
Yeah.
But in terms of like that, what would you say has best served you around like some of this now that you are in the home more with the things that you have and you know the training sessions, workouts that you know you can do where they can be done anywhere and anytime?
Yeah. So, you know, for me, you're right. So one of the things that Brandon and I share, we share similar values, and one of the things that we also share is this idea around freedom, this philosophy that I can create and architect what I want for how I want my life to look. And you know, it's interesting because a lot of my clients are real early risers, and they get up and they bust out a big workout in the morning, and that's then that serves them real well. It doesn't really serve me. Because Grayson gets to bed and she's asleep by 8:30, 9 o'clock. And by the time Jolie and I hang out, let's say it's 9, we have a glass of wine. I don't want to go to bed at 9:30. So I don't. So we hang out. I'll stay up till midnight, but I go to bed a little later. And then I like to sleep in. I track my sleep and I find that my best stages of sleep are typically later, like 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning. So why would the hell I want to get up? My body's in a great recovery mode. And then, so in essence, so that's part of the working out of the house. Like this, I'm in the house right now, but I do have another office that I got because it's you know, once I had, that's just beyond a toddler, but a toddler in the house, I realized there's a little bit of additional conflict I didn't have before that I couldn't control. So now I drop her off. I would bring her to school every morning and drop her off. And then I basically start my day at 9, which is what I do now. And that hasn't changed. The only difference now is instead of getting ready and bring her to school, I'm in the yoga room doing yoga at 8 o'clock. That's the main difference to me. That's nice. So today I did that. And also I looked for a window in my schedule that I had about 45 minutes so that I could get on the Peloton and do a 30-minute cardio workout. It's rainy. I couldn't get outside and walk. So I banged out a 30-minute Peloton ride. So now I had yoga and some meditation tied to that. Plus I had a Peloton. And then, so all of that collectively together, if you add in it's probably an hour and 20 minutes if you add in shower time and everything else, time to get out and get off. So part of what I think, one of the things that Brandon shared with me is that I think sometimes we think that things take so long to get the outcome we want. And I think one of the things that I think would be interesting to share is, right now, most of us have a higher level of stress than we typically do for a lot of reasons. Whether we have people we know who are sick, or we have parents and we're worried about our parents, like I am. I'm not worried about them, but I could be if I allowed myself to be. These whatever it is in our, that's coming at us. Like yesterday, I get the journal. I didn't freaking read it yesterday. I'm like, you know what? I had enough. I'm not doing no media for me today. I mean, media free day, no news, no nothing. That's it. I can't do anything about it anyway. So I'll take the day off. I'll probably do it again tonight. And that's okay. But what would you say about like, what's the best ways to manage state? I'm thinking about state control. Like, I know that I feel that I'm stressed. What can people do to break out of that, and outside of even physically and or mentally? I know there's different strategies, so maybe you could share some.
Yeah, great insights there. So in terms of the current state of physiology and the things that you're experiencing, the very interesting part about, again, kind of culture, society, the way that we've kind of been indoctrinated to act and be is tense. Right? So tension is kind of a passive thing. It just happens. And the more we do things, the more that we engage, especially in stressful types of scenarios, or thinking our way through those, or working through like some of the challenges that we're faced with, the more tension we hold in our bodies. And so relaxation, on the opposite end of the spectrum there, is actually an active pursuit. So if you feel yourself like agitated and stressed out, whether it be because of something that you're currently dealing with, or just like Chris was talking about worries or things that are out there, or the media, or whatever it may be, usually you'll feel that in your body if you're present enough to kind of allow it to be the case, right? And so if that's something that you're recognizing, and you are in a stressful environment, or you feel like you're in a stressful body, which is a stressful environment, then the fastest way to start to gain some semblance of influence over that is to adjust your breath. And so when you kind of bring your conscious attention and focus to your breath, then it allows you to start to get present into your body and to be proactive about choosing relaxation instead of the tension that would have passively continued to build. So in terms of response for that, there's a very specific way that you can breathe that will relax and calm you very, very rapidly. And Chris brought up another good point around like timing of this. So timing for this can be used if you are in a stressful environment or stressful situation that you'd like to get out of, right? Especially for this is because of kind of the integrated way that most things are. If you're stressed out and then go and take that out on your spouse or your children, then that leads to even more stress for everyone, and usually leads to you feeling bad after having done so. So if you're going to change environments, then this is a great thing to do as you change environments, is just to go through this brief breathing practice. So the breathing practice is this, and you can all kind of go through it and do it and experience this while we do it. Is the best way to kind of actually learn something here, is by changing your behavior a little bit. So when you breathe in, you ideally breathe in through your nose. And so you take a nice deep breath in through your nose. And then at the very end of that exhalation, you sharply inhale again. So it's like, and then exhale nice and slow through your mouth. And so it's a deep breath in through your nose, and then a sharp inhalation at the very top of that inhale, and then exhale nice and slow through your mouth. And so those of you who are here with us live, go ahead and try that a couple times in just a couple of breaths. And as you do this, what I would invite you to do is bring your attention and awareness to the length of your exhalation, how long you're actually exhaling. So when we breathe in, we want to continue to allow that exhalation, when you're breathing out, to be slower and slower, longer and longer. And then as you do that, what you can do also is when you inhale, right, and then do that rapid inhale at the end, you can hold it there for a few seconds, and sense any tension that exists in your physiology and in your body. And then as you sense that tension, you can physically release and relax that as you exhale. Okay, so as you breathe in, sense any tension that exists in your body. And then as you breathe out, allow yourself to relax more and more deeply with each and every breath. And the reason that works so effectively and works so well is because our breath is something that's very, very tied to our nervous systems. So when we inhale in this way, we oxygenate everything in our lungs, right? With that especially really sharp inhalation at the top, we fill all the little alveoli in our lungs with air. And then when we exhale and exhale slowly, it's tied to the other part of our nervous system. So when you inhale, it's actually tied to the sympathetic nervous system, which is this nervous system responsible for stress, right? And dealing with stress. So that fight or flight response, that fight, flight, freeze response we talked about, that's what that nervous system is really going to be excellent at. The exhalation on the other side is tied to the parasympathetic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system that's responsible for the beating of our heart, you know, all of the involuntary things that work, and is called largely our rest and digest nervous system, which is where most of us want to be right now, most of the time, if we want to have a healthy immune system. So that simple breathing practice can be done in the course of 30 seconds. It can be done for the course of 5 minutes if you want to really, really deepen that state of relaxation. But it's something that you can leverage right now, and that you can leverage again each time that you're going to change environments and you don't want to carry whatever tension, whatever stress you were having into that next environment. So I highly recommend you test that out and play with it a little bit today. And then the other piece of that that's really, really critically important to this as well is sleep quality. Right? Sleep quality, and some of the research and some of the studies that I've been looking at around, you know, this COVID-19 strain of virus and what they've started to see correlated to it, melatonin levels are very, very highly correlated to the effectiveness that we have to dealing with this virus. The higher your melatonin levels are, then the less this virus seems to impact you and your physiology at large. The lower and more depressed your melatonin levels are, the greater risk you have for having a very, very terrible response to this if you were to catch it. Okay, so what that means is everything that we can do to also work on the quality of our sleep and ensure that our melatonin levels are peaking and getting as high as possible, the better. And so this breathing practice is a beautiful thing to do as you're lying in bed, getting ready to drift off to sleep as well. I know a lot of people right now who are having a lot of sleepless nights because they're trapped in some of these patterns of worry and stress and overwhelm, and that's not helping your cause at all. Okay, so this breathing practice, especially done when changing environments, right? When you are experiencing some of that stress, and then as you're drifting off to sleep in the evening, can be really, really beneficial for your health on multiple levels. And again, doesn't take a lot of time. Right? This can be done in 30 seconds. It can be done in 5 minutes. If you want to spend a little bit longer time, this is like a very basic form of meditation practice that you can stay focused and present to if you'd like to benefit in that way as well, if you'd like to extend it a little bit longer, but it doesn't require that to experience the benefits.
Okay, one of the things I want to bring up before we go to any questions we have, anything else you want to cover. I think one of the things that we're at home, Jolie brought this up today. You know, I keep going to the kitchen like I need to eat something, but I don't need to eat. And she was conscious enough to just point it out. And it's not like she went and ate anything. She kept, you know, it was like subconsciously, she's like, I never go in the kitchen this much. But I'm like, well, I think you're probably, it's a rainy day, doesn't help. And, you know, part of you may be bored. And also, I think a lot of us have wired ourselves over time to create a level of comfort with food, whether that be a place I can get a control, elicit a response, right? And I know you're not a food shaming guy, something that we've talked about before, meaning that, hey, when I make cookies, I eat the shit out of them, you know, because I make a conscious choice of making them, and I enjoy it, and I don't give a shit. Like, I just go, you know. But it doesn't mean that, you know, I'm gonna eat 15 of them a day either, and then, you know, become a diabetic. So that's, you know, so we gotta look at why we do what we do, and then control that at a higher level. What would be your feedback? Like if I'm out there and I'm going like, oh man, it's pretty funny. This person I know, she was posting something about how the grocery store was out of some of her favorite Ben and Jerry's, and this dude in the thread posted his freezer, and the whole fucking freezer was like full of like these Ben and Jerry's. Like, I mean, it was like he had more inventory than the grocery store. I couldn't freaking believe it, and it's like, well, but regardless, what's your input on that, and how do I get out of that if that's where I'm at?
No, that's great, Chris. So it definitely is something that, again, is more challenging now than it normally is, because again, the environment is such that your kitchen is only a few feet away most of the time, right? Like unless you have a really big house and it's prohibitive to, go that extra 100 feet to get to the kitchen, right? Then you're going to end up there more often. And again, this has to do with exactly what we were just talking about, as you alluded to there, Chris. One of the things that we all have that's hardwired into us is this pattern that was established before we ever had conscious thought, right? So in terms of a neuroscience standpoint around this, food works, right, to help us feel better. And to all of us at some level, it works because before we could make any decisions for ourselves, when we were either breastfed or bottle fed as infants, right? If any of you have kids or have had kids and been around infants at all, there's one thing that you can usually always rely on to help them get calm. And you can try everything else. And if all else fails, then you can usually put something in their mouth, like a bottle or a breast, and it will quiet them and comfort them, right? So that pattern is fired off hundreds and hundreds and thousands of times for all of us before we ever think our own first conscious thought, right? So food, and usually something that's either very rich or very sweet, which just so happens formula and breast milk, right, have both of those components to them, for most of us fire off that pattern and make us feel better, right? And so with regard to the stress thing, right, the breathing technique can be a great disruptor to that, right? Because again, it helps you to resolve some of that stress. Outside of that, the other thing that we want to do is just make peace with the fact that, hey, sometimes it's okay, like Chris had mentioned. Deprivation is the fastest path to creating more stress in your life, not less, right? So if you're trying to deprive yourself of the things that you really do enjoy and that do serve you to some degree with regard to mitigating your own stress loads, the last thing that you want to do during times like this is cut those out altogether, right? It's the same thing like where, a lot of people who go on a diet, right? They'll go on a diet, they'll deprive themselves of some of these things that help to mitigate stress in their lives, and they'll take up smoking instead, right? Or people stop smoking and then they start like gorging themselves on food, right? Because it's like, okay, this worked. I could smoke a cigarette before. It helped me feel better. Now I'm stressed and I have no way of mitigating that stress, right? So with all these things, they are patterns, right? They are there. And if they're not serving you for whatever reason, then disrupting that pattern proactively is the best thing that you can do. And also honoring it occasionally and just knowing, like Chris said, if there's something that you really enjoy, enjoying it fully and presently, and then being okay with that, right? For most people, the guilt and the shame that they go through after having had something that was a deprivation based thing on their meal plan or whatever kind of thing they think is healthy eating for them is worse in terms of the biochemical response that they have in their body than whatever it was that they ate in the first place, right? So take that in for a second. That guilt, that shame, the cortisol spike that's associated to that is worse for our health, is worse for our psyche than whatever food would have been if you had just eaten the food and taken ownership of like, wow, that really made me feel better, right? I had a couple of bites of that Ben and Jerry's, or even I had my little carton of Ben and Jerry's. And if you just have that and you say, okay, I really enjoyed that. That was really useful to me and I feel better now as a result, then you're better off than if you feel guilt and shame after having done so. Okay, so disrupting the pattern is best case, right? So if you feel yourself wandering into the kitchen, asking yourself, right, just a very simple question, am I actually hungry right now? Or am I just a little bit stressed and I have something that I would like to do about that, right? Because as Chris said, it does provide control. So other things that you can do are the breathing practice that we just went through. You can certainly have a glass of water because most people are chronically dehydrated all the time. So having a glass of water is another great thing that can disrupt that pattern and let you feel some sense of satiety as you actually get something into your stomach. Other things that we've briefly touched on is movement, right? Movement works wonders for resolving stress, right? Part of the reason why we hold tension is because none of us in our current society move enough, right? Our bodies are designed for movement, and most of us are moving very, very little in the way that we work and the way that we live. So the more that you can move, then the more that you can deal with and resolve your stress. And that's just something that, again, is a very, very beautiful part of all this. Any one of those things that are very easy to do, that take seconds, right? Minutes at most to be able to do, can disrupt that pattern and can get you right back on track with what you've decided to do otherwise. And sometimes if you really are hungry and you really need something to eat, then ideally fueling yourself with something that serves your health is really an important thing right now. Right? We talked a little bit about the melatonin levels and how that's been shown to be very, very, kind of correlated to the way that we deal with this virus. Some of the other things that we've seen are the things that we already know, and Chris had alluded to as well, right? Sugar at high levels in our bodies, right, is toxic to us. It provides a toxicity response that we actually have to use the liver for to process out that heightened level of blood sugar, right? So it's why diabetes can be so dangerous for people, but it's also why the last thing that you want to do when there is disease, right, when there is a sickness that we can be exposed to out there that could potentially inflict us and our family, we don't want to be binging on sugar and other things that are toxic to our bodies, right? Any extra layer of toxicity requires that your body go to work on that toxicity, which leaves you exposed to any other potential toxic or negative things out there. So, being mindful of that in this time, and just knowing that the better decisions you can make around your food choices that do serve you, whole foods are usually a great thing if you're actually hungry and wanting to fuel yourself. If it has a label on it, then it's not necessarily a whole food, right? If it comes out of the produce section of the grocery store, most of which are still pretty well stocked, right? Most of the things that people are freaking out about at most grocery stores aren't the things that are the whole foods that are actually fueling their immune systems, right? The pasta aisles and the rice aisles and all these things that are missing from grocery store shelves, yes, they do store well, but they also store in our bodies well, right? And they store in our bodies well as fat and as things that we usually don't want to have excessive amounts of. So they're not really serving most of the people out there who are attempting to hoard them. So stick to the aisles that are, without labels, and you'll do much better to serve yourself with regard to your nutritional choices during this time, and that includes your immune system.
For more information, please visit chrisyonker.com and mythrivinghealth.com.